Typhoon Nesat headed towards the western coast of the South China Sea. Now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 18th. Right now, Typhoon Nesat is the strongest thing out there by some way, a Category 2 storm in the Western Pacific, and we have now declared a subtropical depression off the western coast of Cyprus in the Mediterranean Sea this evening, and will have a short life as it dives towards the south and probably only last about 24 hours. In the Atlantic, it's day 140 of hurricane season, and there are no areas of interest, which is great news for people like us that want to break in the Atlantic, but there is nothing there for any storm seekers out there. In the Eastern Pacific though, day 157, and we have an area of interest that has a high chance of development as it continues along the coast of Mexico, and models showing that this could get quite strong as it continues paralleling the coast and then eventually perhaps taking a track similar to Orlean. In the Western Pacific, Nesat there, a Category 2, it will start to weaken shortly if it isn't already. 91W we've declared a tropical depression, don't know why that wasn't on the original image, and a area of interest there as well at 40% for the next 5 days. And in the Indian Ocean, our team have marked a moderate chance of development for this potential storm that's been on the books, on the models, for a great long time now, and it has now been put up to 50% chance by our analyst team for a potential impact in India next week. Latest satellite imagery shows this is what the Atlantic looks like right now, and you can see quite a general late season pattern now developing, a few thunderstorms blowing through the southern and eastern seaboard of the United States there, attached to a frontal system, but in the tropics things looking pretty dead. In the Eastern Pacific we don't have GOES 17 tonight for some reason, but you can clearly still see what's going on there in the eastern East Pacific, with a few storms blowing off further towards the west there in the intertropical convergence zone, but nothing that's getting developed right now. Alright then, well first of all let's take a look here at this European system just off the western coast of Cyprus right now, blowing up a bit of convection. An Ascat Pass not long ago found winds of 35 miles per hour. Coupled with that convection is safe enough for us to declare a subtropical depression out of that. Probably won't develop any further and die off in about 24 hours. Here is Typhoon Nesat, which is looking decent as we get into today. An eye has been fluctuating in and out. Perhaps it was an eye wall replacement cycle that happened overnight, but once again there it is. Probably an open eye wall, and an eye that is going to generally struggle as it continues along here. Models calling for weakening to occur pretty soon and quite rapidly as well, down to a tropical storm by the time it passes Hainan Island to the south. And here is a wider shot. You can see right up there, the top right hand corner, that other tropical depression, 91W. It's been established that it's got a center of circulation and it's blowing up that convection, so it now has the prerequisites needed to be to be designated as a tropical depression right now. The rest of the Western Pacific looking a bit messy there as well, but there are a few other systems there, including that 40%. There's a wider shot showing that whole picture in the last 24 hours, how all of it's come together, and in the center there, in the middle of the Pacific, you can see all of those messier systems, one or two getting some rotation going on as well, so there'll certainly be an opportunity for a storm to spin up after the typhoon moves away. There it is once again, you can see on the top right hand side, looking towards the Indian region. Look closely in the next few days near the Andaman Islands and into the Andaman Sea, where we might start to see some rotation occur. The low pressure system is just about there right now and is starting to develop. And in the southern hemisphere, around Australia, there's a fronts moving through there, and you can see a lot of rain associated with that, quite possibly, certainly a lot of cloud coverage. And down near Fiji and Tonga, another trough moving through there as well. So let's take a look at sea surface temperatures ahead of this potential system in the Eastern Pacific. Well, it's going to be moving over a very warm area, the warmest patch of the Eastern Pacific, which to some has been ailing this year, but to others suggesting that it's actually been a big surprise of a season in the Eastern Pacific, which was supposed to be really struggling, but yet here we are looking out for the R name. In the Atlantic, very good conditions still there as well in the main areas, the Caribbean Sea up to 30 degrees generally, and in the main development region still, and out up to the Sargasso Sea in some areas too. Indian Ocean is primed and ready for that potential system as well, pushing 30 degrees Celsius in a large part of the Bay of Bengal, particularly along the coast of India, right along Bangladesh and Myanmar. Looking to the Western Pacific, sea surface temperatures will drop a little bit for Typhoon Nesat, currently at around 28 degrees Celsius. It will drop a little bit before it reaches Hainan. And in the Philippine Sea, decent temperatures all around there as well, where the other system is. It's going to start to drop away a little bit soon, but it's still got around 28 degrees Celsius waters, 91W. And that is above average when you look at the SST anomalies. You can still see the La Nina in full force there, not quite as much as in the last week. And in the Atlantic, still generally above average, especially in the Western Gulf and in parts of the Caribbean Sea there. So can't rule out late season activity, but at the moment the Atlantic is looking fairly quiet in the real imagery. But certainly conditions are very much still there. Look at the Western Caribbean there, the oceanic heat content through the roof still. Eastern Pacific, there's a few little dregs there off the coast of Mexico which might fuel this system. And in the Western Pacific it's still looking pretty decent too, although it has been falling away a little bit. But still good oceanic heat content for that Philippine Sea area, which is very notorious for late season cyclones. So let's check the model. This is what the GFS is showing for the next 5 days regarding the Eastern Pacific. You see a broad system develops and becomes a major hurricane there as it continues along that path and starts to turn towards the north at the end of that 5-day period. Watch again as this system wraps around. A very sloppy beginning, but eventually it does get itself together, and there it is once again. Probably a borderline category 4 there being predicted by the GFS. In the Western Pacific, there's Nesat weakening substantially as it moves past Hainan. It's dead before it even reaches Vietnam. And then that potential other system forming behind it, that's the 40% there. That's another typhoon potentially moving through the Luzon Strait and then towards the South China Sea. Very similar path actually to what Nesat has just done. And far over to the east you can see maybe a third system developing there on the GFS run and heading towards Guam, so that might be interesting to see. That's day 5 there. Indian Ocean, this is what happens. Andaman Sea, around the Andaman Islands, you look out for that center. It takes a while to develop, but there it is starting to wrap up now in the Bay of Bengal, and surprise, the Arabian Sea also throwing up a system from the GFS, which none of the other models are really supporting, so we'll just cast that out for the time being. But that is something I suppose we can't ignore. But it's mainly the Bay of Bengal system, and it looks to get quite large there in those early stages of its life. Let's check the rainfall estimates then for the 2 Pacific typhoons here. This is up to day 7, in which the second system impacts the Philippine Islands. There it is moving through after the first one has already impacted Hainan. Of course, it delivered a lot of rain to the Philippines as well. But look, from the 7 days from now, a further 12 inches of rain possible for the northern part of Luzon. That's 300 millimeters, and similar amounts for the eastern coast of Hainan from this first typhoon. And that's without considering the second one in that 7-day period. Looking at some rain amounts elsewhere, 4 inches possible in northern Taiwan, that's 100 millimeters, and similar amounts for some coastal regions of Vietnam, only in isolated locations. Generally the rainfall should be less. Let's look at the longer range, day 5 to 10, and there is an Orlean repeat there for the coast of Mexico, very close to the areas that were affected last time by that storm pushing northwards, and after that nothing. I'm trying to remember those areas affected. I think it was Nayarit and Sinaloa, and there is a category 1 landfall probably there towards that early part of that run. So that's probably day 6 or 7 there as it makes landfall. And looking at the Western Pacific during that time, well, there's that second typhoon, And what happens to that other system? Looks like it develops as well. That's a Vietnamese landfall there, probably category 1. And there's that third storm piling towards the Philippines there, being really pushed down southwestwards there by, it must be a steering ridge maybe, or I'm not quite sure, but really being pushed down by some winds there. You can quite clearly see them even on the graphic there to its north, and that really intensifying storm can't be ruled out. We'll be watching out for that towards day 10. So this is day 5 to 10 for the Indian Ocean. You can see both of those two systems, but we'll mainly focus on the Bay of Bengal. There it is, that category 1 or 2 making landfall there in India. An interesting movement as it does so. It turns towards the west, making landfall not far from Visakhapatnam, and then continuing westwards after landfall, moving inland over the over a large portion of the interior of India. So that's another path to consider, but that is quite a way out on the models. That's all the serious stuff out of the way at this point. Scan the barcode and it will take you to the Force 13 store. You can take a look at all of our items, including full season and individual storm animations, bespoke, made for you, and our still waiting for Hone t-shirts, which are still up for grabs. Into the Scilly range, this very strong typhoon, and it's been shown for a few runs now, making landfall through the central part of the Philippines in the Bicol region, and then shooting northwestwards and moving on up towards, not far from Hong Kong, but to the west of there in China, and then continuing northeastwards. That's at the very late part of the run. Something to watch out for, but certainly nothing to panic about yet. That is still a long way out. We've got to see the progress of that second typhoon before we even think about this potential third one. Well, what happened on this day in the world of storms? It was 1989 on October 18th when Typhoon Elsie was about to make a category 5 landfall on the coast of Luzon. You can quite clearly see it there. They happen a lot more often than you think, these category 5 landfalls in Luzon. I guess that's the main reason why the eastern coast particularly is not very well populated, and very rugged in terrain as well. It gets whacked by so many storms over history. And Tropical Depression 24E was also active in the eastern Pacific, but it wouldn't amount to anything more than that. Back to this year, and the next name on the Atlantic naming list in 2022 is Lisa. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Roslyn, and in the Central Pacific, we are still looking out for Hone. 77 storms so far this year, 92 is the average. I think we'll get there. In the Western Pacific, next up is Haitang, and in the North Indian Ocean, it's Sitrang. Rhyming, both of those storms there. And looking towards the southern hemisphere in the Australian region, Darian is next up, the Southwest Indian Ocean, Cheniso, and in the South Pacific it's Harley. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.